I'm sorry, but that looks pretty flash to me. Earlier I spoke to Corrections Minister Judith Collins and Peter Williams QC, President of the Howard League for Penal Reform. I began by asking the Minister if she was committed to the container option and if it was the cheapest option.
The Corrections Department has been looking at a range of options and they're putting those together and the business case, but we could get plugged into, say, a prison like Rimutaka, a cell on the basis of about $53,000 to $63,000 a bed. That's a much cheaper option than having to build a brand new prison or anything else, but we're going to have to do that anyway unless there's a change in behaviours for criminals.
All right, you're talking about the need to build a new prison. If you do that with containers, and you've said they're pretty much the cheapest option, I've worked it out based on your figures. It works out at about $3 million per 40-foot container. How can it be that expensive?
Well, we're not looking at actually building a new prison with containers. It's not necessarily the great option for a new prison. A tilt slab is a much better option because of the long-term maintenance issues. But
what is that? What is a tilt slab?
Well, tilt slab precast concrete, and that's a great option, and many of us live in homes built of it. It's a great option, but it does take longer, and if we're looking at adding on to the existing prison structures like at Rimutaka, the container option is certainly one that we're looking at. But look, Paul, you know, we've got to deal with it. We can't wait around. We've had the previous government didn't leave us with enough beds, and we have to deal with it very quickly.
So why don't you just do it then? Buy some containers, stick them in.
Well, we've got 2 at the moment at Rimutaka being looked at and being assessed. But look, you know, we've got to make sure that they're set up properly, that they're humane, and that we can do so under the right conditions.
All right, Peter Williams.
I tell you what, they look a lot better than Mount Eden.
Well, yeah, and this is a point that a lot of people. This is a point that a lot of people will make, Peter. That these containers will probably be a lot more humane than some of the cells they're being kept in at the moment.
Oh, I agree. I agree with Judith there. We have probably the worst prisons in the Western world. But to have a shanty town of these things, which in 4 or 5 years will degrade, there'll be rust, there'll be windows that won't open, the air conditioning won't work. It'll be a tin shanty, a slum prison, which will make New Zealand the laughing stock of the world.
All right, so your concern here is not with the initial container, is not with necessarily keeping prisoners in containers, it's the fact that they may well not be maintained properly.
What is going to happen with these tin shanties in New Zealand? It's okay for a while, they'll have air conditioning and so forth. That'll all break down, it won't be maintained. Things in prisons are never maintained, and you're going to have deaths.
Is that a valid concern, Judith?
No, only if these are not maintained, but actually right now, Paul, we have to have proper ventilation for prisons, and that's something that is maintained.
But is there proper ventilation for prisoners now?
I spoke to a prisoner today who was in Perimarumu prison. He told me at no stage could he ever remember, he'd been there for 10 years, the air conditioning ever working.
So maybe there's not proper ventilation now.
Never works.
That prison is actually 50 years old, Paul. That's one of the issues that we're dealing with, is an ageing base.
But given that is a purpose-built prison, you know, doesn't Peter have reason to be concerned?
50 years ago, Paul.
Well, yeah, but doesn't Peter have reason to concern that something that has been designed to send frozen goods on a ship, perhaps in 5 years' time, may be in the same state that Rimutaka is in now?
Who's going to take the responsibility if people die in these things?
This is actually what we've got here is we've actually going to have roofs on them. They're going to be properly set up. They are used overseas. They're used in Australia. They're used in the UK.
They were turned down in Australia. They were tried there and turned down.
No, they're used in Western Australia and the Northern Territory right now. But it's very important that we actually house these prisoners.
Peter, if they were maintained properly, would you be happy with them? Because let's remember, we have peacekeepers representing New Zealand overseas in these containers.
I know they won't be maintained. I know prisons. I've been 50 years I've been going to prisons. I've seen so many young people ruined by prisons. I've seen so many young people it's not necessary for them to go to prisons. They come out, they can't get jobs. There's bias against them in the community. Now to degrade them further by putting them into these tin shacks, which in a few years will rust, the doors won't open, the air conditioning won't work, and the whole thing will be just
But you also know, Peter, that you also know, Peter,
prison slum.
You also know that there are people watching this program right now who would dearly love to be given that kind of accommodation because they are struggling in the community. They are living in substandard accommodation now. They don't want to be spending their hard-earned tax dollar so that prisoners can live in the lap of luxury.
I don't think 2 wrongs make a right. I'm sure there are people that don't have proper habitation in New Zealand. Poverty is growing at a great rate. The distance between the poor and the rich is growing all the time. We have great sociological problems. children not being properly educated. There's all sorts of things. To go on spending more and more money on these prisons when the money could be direct to education, to refuting alcohol abuse and all the causes of crime is absolutely ridiculous.
All right, Minister, finally, when is the first prisoner going to move into the first container?
Well, we haven't decided that, Paul, but I tell you, we need to have them housed by February next year.
And this thing will be abused. They'll be left in these tin things, 11 most of the day. They'll be lucky to get out for an hour. There'll be all sorts of tragedies and hangings and mutilations and riots. You're really in for problems. This is absolutely disgraceful.
We will follow it closely. Minister Judith Collins, Peter Williams QC, thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.